This, in my opinion, is one of the most underrated classic novels. It is Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. Now, everyone knows the story, but I don't think the book itself and the writer get enough credit. Now, obviously, the characters and the names Jekyll and Hyde have become a sort of metaphor for the split person, and we see this a lot in literature. It's a very common trope now because of this book. But this book is so much more than just that, and there's a reason that those tropes are so popular and this book became so well renowned. First, I'll give you an example of the prose in this book, the poetry, really. A great chocolate-colored pall lowered over heaven, but the wind was continually charging and routing these embattled vapors, so that as the cab crawled from street to street, Mr. Utterson beheld a marvelous number of degrees and hues of twilight. For here it would be dark, like the back end of evening, and there would be a glow of a rich, lurid brown, like the light of some strange conflagration, and here, for a moment, the fog would be quite broken up, and a haggard shaft of daylight would glance in between the swirling wreaths. And that's pretty insane. And this is something that continues throughout the entire book. But even beyond this, writing the characters of Jekyll and Hyde I find so interesting, particularly Hyde. Now, there's a lot of speculation as to what Hyde is actually meant to represent, but it is very much apparent, and the reason that this book is so popular is because Hyde himself is his own person, right? He isn't just a split of Jekyll. That's the great psychology of this book, is that Hyde represents perhaps something that Jekyll himself doesn't even understand. Although Jekyll gives us this idea that that Hyde rather is something within him, that it is in some sense under his control, it's quite apparent that Hyde is not. Hyde is his own entity. He is something about Jekyll that Jekyll doesn't even himself realize. And the split there where Jekyll doesn't really have control anymore is what makes this book so interesting. There's also so many little quirks throughout it, so like Hyde using Jekyll's handwriting at the end. I won't spoil the book, but I think that's very fascinating. Now, there's a lot of different authors. Nabokov, for one, I think, believed that Jekyll this story rather, was like a representation of homosexuality. And I didn't really get that at first, but I can see why he might think that. But there's just so much to this book, and there's so much to unpack, and that's why I find it so interesting, that this little 86-page book can have so much in it, and the character of Hyde and Jekyll, for that matter, are just fascinating. But I'd love to hear your thoughts on this book, if you've read this book, and what your interpretation of it was.